Hey everyone, Jeff Lee here. I am joined today by Ryan Snyder, Senior Product Specialist from Canon. We have a very important and very exciting introduction of the brand new Canon Cinema EOS R5 C. So I think, like the R5 C aspect indicates, it's a little bit of a special twist on the EOS R5. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. Really glad you could be here.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here.
So why don't we talk right away about the fact that the C, the little letter C there, makes a big impact on the actual distinction of what this camera does for us. So it looks like an EOS R5, but the C, I think, like you were saying earlier, suggests that it's a hybrid camera, or I think, as you put it so eloquently, it's a true two-in-one camera.
Absolutely, yeah. That C means that this is part of our Cinema EOS lineup. And so while it shares almost all the features with the EOS R5, this is a true Cinema EOS camera. That C and that red button gives that away. And it really all comes down to the mode switch on top of the camera. So with that switch in photo mode, you have the full EOS R5 experience. You have the same specifications, that great full frame 45 megapixel sensor. You have dual pixel CMOS AF2. You have that fast frames per second of 20 frames per second in electronic and 12 frames per second in mechanical. So everything that you're used to on the still side, when you switch to video, everything changes. You actually get a full Cinema EOS experience. So the menus change over to the Cinema EOS side. The user interface switches over. And so you've got the best of both worlds. It really is two cameras in one.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to reiterate too, that menu, while it seems like a minor thing, is a really big deal, especially when you're talking to folks that have been using these cameras for a long time. Muscle memory is a real thing, and it's just how fast you can jump between settings to capture that shot, whether it be a still shot or video, makes a big difference. So I think that's something that's really important too, to just remind folks that the fact that you have the distinct menu means that those that are used to, let's say, EOS R or R5 ecosystem will feel immediately at home. And then conversely, on the other end of it, those that are used to a C300 Mark III or C500 Mark II, when they flip the switch over here to video, will also feel right at home because the layout is identical to those platforms. So it really, like you just said, becomes that true two-in-one, where this could slot in as either an A cam or B cam, or secondary camera for a shoot, or flip it into the stills mode and you have a gorgeous EOS 5R stills camera as well. And you mentioned all those important specs, which is really key. I also want, if you don't mind, let's touch upon some of the things you just briefly mentioned about things like the assignable buttons. There are a plethora of buttons on this, and some of the markings on this are distinct between whether it's a stills mode or whether it's in video mode. So can you touch a little bit upon that, please?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And yeah, you're right with the muscle memory. Anybody who's used to holding an EOS R5 or even a C70 is going to be right at home as soon as they pick up the camera. The buttons are laid out, in the same places. The dials operate the same way. So it's going to be a really easy learning curve as far as operation in that regards. Yeah, so all of the buttons on the camera are actually double marked. So any indicator on the inset of the button is for the still mode. And then what's printed on the outside is for the video mode. So everything has double duty, depending upon which mode you're in. And you have 13 assignable buttons all over the body that you can assign to pretty much any function. So you can really make it your own, whether you're in photo or video mode.
Yeah, that's great. I want to come back, of course, to talking about some of the specs as far as recording options and a beautiful sensor. But while we're on the physical, let's talk a little bit about the things like the media card slots. So it's a dual slot camera, right? And it takes, it is a CF Express Type B as well as an SD style card, like an SDXC, and you guys recommend, I think you said a V90, is that accurate?
So yes, it has the same card slots as what's on the R5. So you've got the CF Express Type B as well as the SD card. And yes, V90 is recommended for especially slow motion recording on that SD card.
Sure, and then of course things like the ports are always important. So you have the things that I think most folks would expect, like a microphone and headphone output, but also an HDMI. And can you talk a little bit about the HDMI capabilities? Because of course this will record as an output raw over the HDMI spigot.
Absolutely. So yeah, for the first time on a Cinema EOS camera, you can output HDMI RAW. Currently only to the Atomos Ninja 5 Plus, but you have the capability to output up to 8K RAW in 30p.
Wow, yeah, and like you said, it's only currently with the Ninja 5, but I'm sure there's others may be coming as well. Things like a PC sync port, which we expect for the still side, but this is a really interesting port, the timecode slot. I think that's really key. So this is really critical, of course, for shooting video, but let's talk a little bit about the fact that you guys have been able to even fit a timecode port on a camera this small.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly recognize how important the timecode function is for multicam shooting, and it's a required spec a lot of times. So we were able to fit the dedicated timecode port onto this camera by utilizing the smaller DIN 1.0 over 2.3 connection. But with that, you can connect up to another camera, sound recorder, timecode generator, anything that you'd need to do to sync up.
And of course, DIN cables are readily available to convert to standard BNC, so you can just use, like we're using a bunch of C300s for the shoot today, so I could jam this with the cameras that we're using today for this shoot and integrate this as part of our video here. So that's fantastic to see. As far as other, going back to the memory card slots, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about some of the recording options, because I think that's really critical point to illustrate for those that are used to shooting with a Cinema EOS camera, that all those features that they're expecting are still there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this being a full frame camera, I guess the big deal is the internal RAW 8K up to 60p, and that's in Cinema RAW Lite. So you've got that. You've got a Super 35 mode, which will be able to record 5.9K RAW, and then you can take it down to a Super 16 mode, and that's going to be at 2.9K RAW. And with Cinema RAW Lite, we have introduced actually 3 different modes now. We have an HQ high quality mode, a ST standard quality mode, and an LT, which is a light recording mode. So it's just basically reallocating the bit rate to be able to fit the particular resolution and the frame rates onto the card. But it's important to note that all 3 of those modes are 12-bit RAW, regardless of the frame rate that you choose.
It's huge that we have 12-bit RAW coming out of a camera this small. It's hard to believe almost. And then because it's dual slot, you have some of the really great features, right, such as relay record and dual slot record. So then can we talk a little bit about sort of the options there? Because that opens up a lot as far as folks being able to designate which card records what, or maybe it's a proxy, maybe it's a second format, XFAVC, et cetera. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, it just presents a huge range of options and flexibility for workflow. You mentioned XFAVC. The camera can record up to 4K 120p in XFAVC 10-bit 422, and that's our tried and true MX wrapper codec. And so you have options like recording RAW to the CF Express and XFAVC to the SD card in that full 422 10-bit. You can also choose different sub-recording options, such as XFAVC to one card and MPEG-4 to another, intra to one card, long GOP to another. We even have the ability now to be able to record a separate WAV file to the SD card, so you can just record audio to that while you're doing video to the other card. So there's just way too many options to go to in depth, but really, any kind of workflow is going to be supported.
So in addition, of course, to the wide range of RAW options that we have internally, for those times that you don't need that, you of course have the tried and true XFAVC codecs available. And of course, like you mentioned earlier, 4K up to 120 in the slow motion or slow and fast modes. So can you talk a little bit about some of the options there?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So you've got the true slow and fast motion recording mode that you'll find on the Cinema EOS cameras. And what that means is you're not just stuck to a single high frame rate recording mode where it just jumps from a standard up to 120. You have a full range on this camera, everywhere from 1 frame per second all the way up to 120. And depending upon which base frame rate that you choose, you have different options as far as the increments. So that's huge. That gives a lot of flexibility that you just you only get on that Cinema EOS style of camera. Important to note that you also have autofocus in the most common frame rates. So if you're overcranking at 30, 48, 60, 90, even 120, you still have dual pixel autofocus working.
That's great. I imagine a lot of the action sports type folks would really love that feature, especially when you're shooting 120, and be able to rely on that super fast dual pixel autofocus, which is nice. We didn't really mention this, but I think we probably should have from the very beginning. Of course, it's an RF mount, being that it's a EOS R family. But that means, of course, it's available with all of the great RF lenses that are coming out, and with certain adapters, you can go back to EF lenses or PL lenses if you're, say, using a Cinema Prime on this. But that really lends itself to this really small, compact body. When this is in my hands, it feels immediately familiar. It feels just like the EOS R5. But dimension-wise, it's about the same. You guys, of course, have added a fan since we are now adding a lot of video capabilities, 8K in cinema raw light of all things. So it's a little bit wider, right, to accommodate the fan, but it's overall about the same footprint and weight.
Yeah, it's just about the same height and width as the R5. It's super lightweight at 1.7 pounds, and yeah, like you mentioned, it's just a little bit deeper to accommodate that active cooling system there. And it's important to note that that fan operates in video mode only, and it's very quiet in low mode. You also have the ability to change the speed if you wanted to crank it up a little higher, if you needed to, you have always on, you have automatic mode where you can choose to have the fan stop running when you're actually rolling. So if you're in environments where the audio might pick that up, you can accommodate for that. And really what this gives us, and the biggest thing to shout home about, is that you have unlimited recording time even in that 8K recording mode.
Yeah, and it's just amazing, like we said, in a body this small to have 8K in a RAW format as well. And you touch upon an important aspect too of video, the audio, of course. So of course this has dual input or dual channel microphones built in, but with your smart shoe and the accessory that you have there with you from Tascam, you're able to add a bunch more audio options.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is the third Canon camera to feature the new multifunction shoe, and that multifunction shoe is compatible with a Tascam CA XLR 2D C, which is made for this shoe. And what this gives us is the ability to do two full-size XLRs or TRS cables, and with all the features you'd expect: phantom power, manual levels, limiting, things like that. And it all goes straight through the multifunction shoe. And along with the 1/8 inch jack on the camera, you can get up to 4 channels of audio on this very compact body.
Yeah, that's amazing. The fact that you now have a run and gun dock package, or even something you're using for scripted narrative work in a body that's no bigger than a small Pelican case that we would carry the original Sound Devices audio recorder in on set, and now you have a whole video package to go with it. So of course, as an EOS R style body, it uses the RF mount, which is great. A lot of new lenses coming out for that, which is great to see, but also of course backwards compatible if you have adapter to go to EF, or even specialty things like you have a PL adapter to use some of the specialty optics. So what are we looking at as far as lens options these days?
Yeah, well, like you said, I mean, we are continuing to develop and put out amazing RF glass, so you have that native capability. Of course, the extensive line of EF lenses is adaptable with our various mount adapters. Even the 0.71x adapter is compatible with this when you're in Super 35 mode, so you can get that full frame projection of the lens in that mode and gain an additional stop of sensitivity out of the EF lens. And yeah, with as well as other options, you got anamorphic support on this guy, so you can actually do 1.3, 1.8, or 2x D-squeeze, both on the camera and out the HDMI port. And It is compatible with the 5.2 millimeter dual fisheye lens as well. So for 180-degree VR applications, this camera is compatible with it, and you can shoot 8K MPEG-4 up to 30p with this. And again, due to the active cooling system, no overheating in that mode.
Yeah, it's great the fact that you have so many options. Like you mentioned, I think I always get this number wrong. It's like 11 million or 12 million lenses in the EF family now, and then the RF adds to that. And I get in trouble because I always forget that number. It's always growing, but you have all those lenses plus specialty PL, like we mentioned, anamorphic support is great as well. So. Of course, with a camera this small, often we might see it in a rig or maybe even on a gimbal of some sort. So we want to touch upon some maybe camera control options too, or even what we're doing here, which is sort of a remote style shoot. So of course, being in the EOS family, it'll support EOS utility, but can you touch upon what some of those control parameters might look like, especially on the video side of things?
Sure. So yeah, you mentioned EOS utility, and all of the photo applications that we support are supported in that mode. When you switch to video, then you switch over to our video applications, such as like XF utility instead of EOS utility. But for camera control, the camera has Wi-Fi built in for the still mode. In the video mode, in order to get any kind of Wi-Fi, you do need to add one of the compatible grips, and that's the WFT R10 network grip, which adds the vertical shooting at the bottom and just attaches to the bottom of the camera. But that's actually required for any wireless functions in video. But with that, you can use our browser remote, which gives you basically full camera control, everything that you need to adjust as far as exposure. It gives you the live view on screen, and you can adjust pretty much anything you need to do, including the autofocus point with that.
And that's great. It certainly has become sort of a common language with a lot of the shoots that we're seeing these days with, of course, all the COVID safety things that we have to keep in mind. So that's amazing to see that we still have all that functionality built in, with the grip adapter. So.
In addition, you mentioned remote workflows, and this camera is one of the first Cinema EOS to support USB video class as well. So you can take a USB connection directly into your computer, choose it, and use it exactly like a webcam.
Yeah, that's great. I think we're always a little jealous when we do video conferences with the folks from Canon, because you guys always have the best looking feeds. So that's the secret. If anyone is curious, is to use the web camera utility from Canon. The other aspect of this, of course, being with a compact body, is that you guys are able to pack a lot of features into this, and it's all powered from a very familiar looking battery. But there are some slight differences, of course, because naturally when you have something that is recording and doing more, it might require a little bit more oomph, as it were. So this will still continue to work with the LPE6 and LPE6N batteries, but you have a new version of it that we have here with us today, which is the LPE6, what is it, the NH, I think you called it?
Yes. So absolutely. With this small body, we're running it off of the newer LPE6NH battery, same dimensions, same voltage, just a little bit larger milliamp capacity than the previous models. You can still use the LPE6 or the LPE6N, but certainly you won't have the amount of recording time, and some features may be a little bit limited, like frames per second in still mode.
Understood. And of course, with a lot of the shoots that you might see on set, we build up rigs, so you wouldn't use it just as sort of a bare body. You put a cage around it because you tend to have a lot of accessories, maybe a wireless video transmission for the director, maybe wireless follow focus if you're not using the dual pixel autofocus. So with that said, there are ways to rig additional power to this as well. So if you do have it in sort of a larger rig of some sort, and you guys have opened that up quite a bit. So not only we have the ability to power it off the LPE6NH that you just mentioned, you can also power it over the USB-C port, which we didn't really talk about, but there's a USB-C port on the side here as well. So you guys have tested an Anchor power bank, which is something you would find for your cell phone or your iPad or other mobile device or otherwise, right? And what are the other sort of power options that might be available for those that want to build up a bigger rig?
Yeah, sure. You can power via USB with our PDE1 USB power supply. You can also use, we actually have a new DC coupler, which is the DRE6 C, which looks very familiar to the previous DRE6. This is required for AC powering in video mode, and that connects up to the CA946 AC adapter. So with this, you have a full AC option in addition to our USB power option. And then, like you mentioned, we have also tested the Anker PowerCore Plus PD 26800 basically brick battery, and that actually supplies the proper amount of voltage into the USB to be able to power the camera for an extremely long time.
Yeah, you mentioned you were on a shoot with this sort of early prototype build, and you guys were shooting all day with a little bit of help from the Anker power bank for sort of a longer shoot day. So it's nice to see that this will last, you know, our sort of 8-10 hour days that we're sort of used to in this side of the industry. And of course, the one thing we didn't really talk about yet that we certainly need to address is the image quality. It's something that Canon is always known for, and the fact that this camera supports all of the sort of usual image quality things, including custom picture. But not only that, you have Canon Log 3, you have the HLG and PQ modes. Right, can you talk a little bit about some of those recording image settings, not just the resolution or frame rate, which is of course important, but the actual look of the picture as well?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a full-blown Cinema EOS camera, so it has that custom picture menu, which is kind of the heart and soul of all the gamma and color space settings. You do have Canon Log 3. You've got HLG and PQ for shooting directly to an HDR format. You have 709 wide DR settings as well as standard 709, and the custom picture menu basically gives you all of those handles for camera matching and advanced settings if you really needed to dial in specifics in the image.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I can't wait, personally speaking, to put some of our custom picture profiles onto this that we've done over the years. It's great to know that this can, you know, take the place of a larger Cinema EOS camera or be a nice companion to, or at the same time, I flip it into the photo mode and it becomes my R5 for some of my stills. So that's really exciting. And like you mentioned, it really is a true two-in-one. But that's actually not the only announcement that you guys have made. So we have an exciting announcement about the updates for the Cinema EOS C70, some firmware updates. Can we talk about that too?
Absolutely, I'd love to talk about that too. The C70 is actually getting Cinema Raw Lite internal recording, which is just huge. I mean, so many people have said, hey, if it just had RAW, it would be such an amazing tool, and now you're going to get that. So it's actually introducing the same 3 Cinema Raw Lite modes that we put into this camera. So you've got the HQ, the ST, and the LT recording. And again, all 12-bit. Regardless of frame rate. So it's super exciting there. And you know, due to the SD cards being utilized on the C70, you're going to be limited up to 60p on there, but still it's just a fantastic addition. And in addition to the Cinema Raw Lite, we're actually adding 2 very highly requested recording modes into the camera, both frame recording for stop motion type of recording, as well as interval recording for time lapse. So we're just really happy to be announcing this, and really takes the capabilities of the C70 up to that next level again.
And that's amazing that you're able to introduce that to the C70. Like you mentioned, it's a common request, and now with firmware, you're able to unlock that capability. So, you know, a 1-2 punch, you know, if you will, with the C70 and the R5 C in this kind of new, smaller workflow, but fully featured cameras that we have at our fingertips. So this is really exciting, and I'm so happy that you're able to bring this and show this to us. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. Looking forward to seeing some of the footage that you guys, I know you were out on a shoot with this, so looking forward to seeing some of that and just getting our hands on this. And like we mentioned, we'll make some picture profiles for this and you know, get a little bit more hands-on time with it. So with that, I really thank you, and we'll catch you next time.
Awesome, Jeff. Thank you so much. Thanks to Abel for having us.